The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So, it's my understanding that I was cooking this week. So the retreat was on, we had a continuing practice retreat on grief and loss, right? I can't say that I'm going to talk about that directly, but something that's been coming up for me a lot lately has been the question of what is our true refuge? And when I was thinking about the topic of grief and loss, this is, for me, how I think that it's helpful to approach it. So maybe this will be helpful on that subject as well. Life pulls us in many directions, and it comes at us pretty fast. And often unpleasant conditions arise. And how do we deal with this? How do we deal with a life that is sharp and confusing? And often we don't know anything other than to distract ourselves. When we live life from the untrained point of view, we don't know that we have an option. We don't know that there's another way. So in some way or another, we distract ourselves. And hopefully we're lucky enough to distract ourselves with wholesome activities, things that aren't going to do harm. We're going to garden, or we're going to cook, or, but that's not always the case. Ultimately, I think that, and this has been true for myself and what I've found for myself in my own life, is that I think the truest answer is to find the true refuge, or our true refuge. But you have to kind of be careful to put that my true refuge on there, which is why I say the true refuge. Conditions are not our enemy. They're actually our great teacher. There's a scene from a movie where there's a character standing on a very tall pillar, and he's partaking in some sort of coming of age test, and he has to stand on this pillar for days or something. And another obnoxious character comes along and starts shaking the pillar, and he yells up at him, "Earthquake test!" And the guy catches his balance and steadies himself, and he kind of looks around at everyone who's aghast that this guy just shook the pillar, and he says, "Well, with my help, he's going to be the best." And conditions are our friends, as much as it's hard to see that, but conditions are like our good friend coming along and shaking our pillar and testing us. And for those of us who live in the monastery is a pressure cooker, and this is very intentional. This is not a mistake. That pressure cooker is taking each one of us, we're these raw lumps of graphite, and turning us into a diamond under heat and pressure. It's giving us the opportunity to meet conditions head on and eventually showing us, we see for ourselves how clearly we have a choice in every moment and how we want to respond in that moment. There's a line that I dearly love from the Brahma's Net Sutra that reads, "Trainees whose minds are intent upon the way do not see conditions as separate from the way." When we realize that there is another way to deal with conditions other than just distracting ourselves, that we can actually engage with conditions and that they become a part of our practice, that they are the fuel for our practice. We do not see those conditions as separate from the way. Like I said, they become our friends. They become our teachers. So turning towards anger or fear, resentment, distraction, which often I think could be like seeking out pleasure, just vegging out in front of the television, running away from conditions. But we really become trainees when we turn towards the conditions. Encountering grief and loss, I am lucky enough that I actually don't have much loss, if we're talking about death as the ultimate kind of example of loss in my life yet. But if I don't die young, I'll have plenty of it eventually. And one story which I'll share, which was really hard for me at the time, I, in college, had a cat named Earl, and this cat taught me a lot, which could be a whole nother Dharma talk of itself, but suffice it to say, Earl taught me a lot. And after college, I had given Earl to my mom to take care of, and she very graciously did. And I kind of went off and lived my life for a year and or two, and I had taken the precepts as a Buddhist. I was a Buddhist by that point, and we do a week-long ceremony called Jukai, which is the traditional taking of the precepts. So I was here for Jukai, did the whole week, and it was like the last day, like the evening of the last day, and I turned my phone on for some reason, which is, I'm sure you can all appreciate, you almost don't even think about it, but I must have turned my phone on for some reason that I thought was appropriate. And I can't remember now whether I had a message from my mom or whether I called her or something like that. I just can't remember. But the point is somehow here I am the last day of Jukai, and I'm talking to my mom. And she said, well, I had Earl euthanized the other day. And it was like, what? Like, you did what? I had no idea that was even coming. And so it really was a shock. And I was really mad because I didn't get to say goodbye. And he was just a really good friend. And so here you are on the phone with your mom, and I attribute it to the fact that we had just had this whole week of intense meditation and talking about the precepts for me to not fly off the handle and use a lot of hard language and start yelling at my mom, right? So I just said something polite like, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to go now. And was able to just keep the harmony with that. But it really hurt. And I am forever grateful that I did not jump into anger, because as I've reflected on that situation now, years later, actually, I feel like I was the one at fault in a lot, because I had never paid for any of Earl's food or vet bills or anything like that. My mom just very graciously took on this, being, and became responsible for him as he was starting to fail in the last little while of his life. I wasn't there or offering to help take care of him. I was just a young person, just kind of off living my own life, and that kind of thing at the time just really went over my head. And so I've always been really grateful that I didn't yell at my mom, because I feel like I would have been completely in the wrong. And I learned a really valuable lesson. Again, it took me years of practice and looking back at that situation to see that we all have an intuitive knowledge of Buddha nature. This is something that I think all of Buddhism recognizes. Zen specifically, as I understand it, tends to emphasize this point. It's easy for us to lose sight of that, or to not have any faith or belief in ourselves that we actually do have that intuitive sense, that we are seeing that clearly. As a monk said to me one time, there's a place within all of us that never gets distracted. And there is this place within us that always knows the Buddha, that always knows Buddha nature. And I attribute my ability then to sit still with this budding recognition of that place, and a whole week of being with the Sangha and that support in rooting myself in that place. So how do we begin to root ourselves more deeply in that place, that true refuge, this place that gives us the strength and the ability to face difficult and painful situations? In this case, this example, a situation of loss, which was a great loss for me, and to not turn towards anger or violence. At morning service, often the monks will say something like, "May all beings quickly realize the truth." Well, what is this truth that we're hoping that all beings find? I think depending on who you ask, the answer could come out in different ways. In my opinion, at least maybe even at the moment, I would say that the truth is the truth of what our true refuge is, that knowledge of what is my true refuge, what is our true refuge, to know that for ourselves. This understanding of our true refuge, of that place, it's said that sometimes we can have a sudden realization of that for ourselves. And there's also the dimmer switch analogy, that we are like in a room where the light is being turned up gradually, like a dimmer switch. Some people have these bright and fantastic experiences of the truth or their true refuge. And most of us, I think, it just takes us time, many years, to really ground ourselves in that. And I suspect that it's both, actually. Another favorite story of mine, if it's even true, is that someone asked Einstein about his theory of relativity and whether he came to it suddenly or whether it was after many years of reflection. And he said, well, it came to me suddenly after many years of reflection. we do the practice. Every day we sit and look at a wall, and often it can seem very mundane and boring, but actually the dimmer switch is being turned up. And sometimes we recognize that the room has gotten brighter, and we have these small aha moments. And then we can go through another period where it seems like nothing is happening, and it's very mundane and boring. And then we realize, oh, actually it's gotten even brighter in the room. Practice and faith makes it possible for us to deepen our understanding of and relationship with this refuge. And we have to keep making the effort to turn towards practice and to cultivate faith. For me, I was living in Eugene. I was seriously considering being a monk, so I was a lay resident, and I had been there for about 6 months at the time. And my teacher, Reverend Master Oswin, who was the prior there at the time, was giving a Dharma talk, and or even it was even kind of a class, it was kind of an informal Dharma talk class. And he used this analogy of practice being like a puzzle piece. And what he didn't know was that I had this very strong personal, metaphor or analogy or whatever of the puzzle that I felt like at the time I was putting together this puzzle, and I was collecting up all these pieces. And I know he didn't know that about me necessarily, that I had that image in my mind. I think it was just a random coincidence that he used this puzzle piece as the image. And he said that training is like the center puzzle piece. It's the puzzle piece which holds the whole puzzle together. And for me, that just opened something. I could see for myself how I was putting things and ideas, expectations, whatever mental phenomena, I was taking that thing, and it was like I was putting it on the altar in my heart. It was like that was becoming the refuge. And it would reside there for a little while, and then I would not go and knock it off. Oh, I don't care about that anymore. It's this. This is the thing. That goes on the altar. And that would be there for a little while, and then I'd say, no, that's not right. And then, no, it's actually this. This is it, finally. This is the important thing. And I just kept doing that. I just kept switching these things out. And that practice was the center puzzle piece. I'm kind of a visual person. My brain sees things in images. I'll get a teaching. Someone will be giving a Dharma talk, and they'll say something, and it'll just kind of hit me as a visual or whatever. So the visual was like my closet. If my whole psychophysical self, my spiritual self, everything could be displayed as a closet, and it just was stuffed with junk, all this junk, right, falling off the shelves, no empty space whatsoever, just junk everywhere. And hearing that puzzle piece, I stuck my hands onto the shelf and I pulled everything apart so that there was an empty space on that shelf. And forever after, there is still all this junk in my closet, but forever after, there has been this empty space on that shelf. And okay, so what does that mean? Someone asked me one time, well, are you enlightened? And I thought to myself, I don't know. I don't care, actually. I don't care. What I wound up telling him was, I said, I don't know, but I can tell you that I definitely found what I went looking for. And it reminds me of something that Rev. Master Jiyu said, or is reported to have said, is that enlightenment, it's not what you went looking for, but it is what you find. If you're like me, you set off on this journey to realize enlightenment. And if you stick with the practice, you will eventually realize that you have no idea what that means. And then eventually you'll realize that you don't care what that means. And it's just the next thing. It's just, okay, now it's time to sit, now it's time to chop the carrots. Am I a perfect person since that small insight? No, definitely not. It's an ongoing process. We continue to deepen our understanding of whatever that is, which ultimately I can't describe to you because it's something that's beyond words. And what I can promise you is that you already have it and you already know it. We already know it. We just have to keep coming back to it, and we have to keep making that the reality, because we are very addicted to the self. That is just the circumstances that we find ourselves in. The self is a very delicious delusion, and it is very difficult to let go of. And that's okay. We do not have to beat ourselves up for that. It is not our enemy. It's not the villain. As I told someone recently, it's just sitting in the wrong chair. And so we just have to do a little rearranging. We're not trying to get rid of the self. It just needs to not sit in that chair. You need to sit in that chair. And how do we do that? How do we calibrate? How do we recalibrate ourselves? We do that through meditation, through Zazen. Our daily sitting practice is really important, to sit down and look at the wall, to just let it all go for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes. We have to sit down and let it all go. Just put it down. It'll be there for us when we come back to it. When we do that, we are, it's like diving into a cold lake, and you're going deep down and touching the bottom, just to remember, it's still there. That bottom's still there, but you got to come up for air, right? We don't have gills yet. Zazen or meditation is really important because it's the mirror with which we see ourselves. And we see all of the things that we struggle to put down, that even while we're sitting and looking at the wall, we keep wanting to pick back up. And that's fine, because that's a clue. That's a clue for what we need to work on, to just keep letting it settle and putting it down. Because when we do that, again, I can't tell you what is this refuge with a capital R. If anything, well, the Buddha said in the scripture of the Buddha's last teaching, he says, govern it in a single situation, and there will not be any affair you will be unable to manage. So govern it in a single situation, and there will not be any affair you will be unable to manage. He's basically saying, if you can do this once, then you can do it. Like, if you do it once, you can do this. The work is believing in ourselves that we can do it, and letting go of the pain of that self that wants to do something else, that doesn't like this answer or this way. It wants something else. And what is it that the Buddha is talking about? He's talking about the deluded and discriminatory mind, that mind of ours that inclines towards stuff, that inclines towards the senses, that inclines towards the self. And when we can sit still with that and put that down and not let that be in the captain's chair, that's what he's saying. When you can sit still with that in one situation, you can sit still with it in any situation. And I think, again, it's not a description of what the refuge is, but it's an aspect of it, that we know for ourselves that we have a choice. We know that we have a choice, and that we don't have to blindly follow what our mind is, or our desires, or our fears want us to do. That empty space, that is the freedom for us to choose our own way forward. Our karma ripens, conditions, sometimes joyful, sometimes difficult, whatever we have in our begging bowl, here it is. And we always have a choice of what to do with that, how to engage with that, which then shapes the future moment which will come. The refuge is like a ballast in a ship. And as we continue to deepen our knowledge and understanding, and also the faith in ourselves, the ship is not threatened. And we can go out into stormy waters. We're not afraid to go out into daily life and whatever it brings. And I even have this image in my head of like a Coast Guard ship sailing out into stormy waters because there's some ship out there that's, trapped. And that can be something that we offer to the Sangha as we deepen our practice and strengthen that groundedness, that we can be of help to others who are learning to root themselves in this place too. And I think, that's right. I almost forgot one of my other favorite stories because I moved it. If you all know who D.T. Suzuki is, which I've actually never read anything by him. He's kind of the older generation. But we saw a documentary about him years ago when Reverend Master Oswin and I were in Throstle. And it was a wonderful documentary. And there was an interview, it was like an old taped interview with him. And the interviewer was saying, well, you're supposed to be this enlightened, he was a layperson, and a teacher, as I understand it. And, well, you're supposed to be this enlightened, teacher, and your wife died, and you were crying. Like, how can you be this Zen master and be crying? That doesn't make any sense. And D.T. Suzuki said, well, these tears have no roots. And that just blew my mind when he said that. When he said that in the documentary, I thought, wow, this person must have had a deep experience of the truth, because I don't know, just for me, that was just a brilliant answer. And what he's pointing towards is that, again, the self is not our enemy, our emotions are not our enemy. the grief and the loss is not our enemy. It's that we know what our true refuge is. And these are just things these are just the conditions that are arising, like light dancing on a wall. And here is this pattern and it looks like this. And I experience it like this. And then it goes, and then it's gone. And when we cry, we cry. And when we laugh, we laugh. And that's all just okay, because as Reverend Renee used to have written on her Raksu, everything is resolved within the unborn. It's all okay. And so my advice to myself and to all of us is to keep deepening that faith and understanding of that placeless place, that true refuge that, again, we can't describe or put into words. We can just do our best to point towards it, but ultimately you have to know it for yourself, and don't bite into the delusion that it's something you have to go find. You already have it. We already have it. But to trust that it is there and you do know it, and to turn towards it. Let it lead. And it leads to incredible places, and it leads to, in my experience, a type of peace that makes handling, engaging with often a sharp existence, much more bearable. And thank you very much. That's what you got from me today.